Here's Brody Brazil.
Well, this is a pretty gigantic story to be breaking here on a random Sunday night during spring training. And there's multiple different sources. They're all legitimate. There's also multiple different versions of this story. So I think the big takeaway immediately is that there's just a lot going on. It's difficult to put all this together, but that's what we're going to try and do here in this video. The overarching theme is this. The reports say that there is now significant pressure by Major League Baseball towards the Tampa Bay Rays for owner Stu Sternberg to sell his baseball team. He's caught in the middle of multiple different things. Tropicana Field has been destroyed by Hurricane Milton back in October. A stadium deal is on the table. The city of St. Petersburg and Pinellas County, they've already approved funding for it. The Rays just need to either be in or out by March 31st, so that deadline is also on the table. But now apparently some pressure from the league and its owners and its commissioners towards Mr. Sternberg and the Rays to have an ownership change to try and get a different situation. And full marks, by the way, to J.P. Peterson of the J.P. Peterson Show. He's a broadcaster in Florida. He's got a radio program on a daily basis. He put this out about 2 weeks ago. We've talked about it here on the channel. I've made this video. Just got further confirmation of an elite Tampa-based group in serious negotiations to buy the Rays with support of Major League Baseball with their preference to build a new stadium in Tampa. Can't release the names yet, but hopefully soon. More details in the video below. The only thing that it seems like Mr. Peterson got wrong, and I say this as a compliment, is that there are multiple different versions of that ownership group. There's multiple groups. So he was right. In fact, he was so right that there's just a double down on how many groups there actually are. This is what he said in a video.
All right, breaking news, Rays fans. We have further confirmation of this elite group of Tampa businessmen that are in deep negotiations to buy the Rays. I cannot give you the names right now because I don't want to jeopardize the deal, which is fully supported by Major League Baseball. And they want this new group to purchase this team because they have Tampa Bay roots.
So his video goes a couple minutes longer. I wanted to cut it off there. You get the point. He called this out multiple weeks ago, and nobody really knew the serious nature of it. I mean, where did he get the information from? But again, got to give credit to J.P. Peterson. He kind of had this first, and now I'll move on to some reporting by Mark Topkin. Eventually, I'll get to Evan Drellich of The Athletic, but Mark Topkin has covered the Rays for a lot of years for the Tampa Bay Times. Here's what his article says. Tampa businessman Joe Molloy is leading a Tampa-based group seeking to buy the Rays and pursue the planned St. Petersburg stadium deal. Again, the one that's already on the table, the one that the Sternberg ownership group has presented, produced, and got approved. It's just uncertain whether they're actually in on it. Seems like they kind of got cold feet on it. Molloy confirmed his group's interest to the Tampa Bay Times here tonight as I'm recording this on Sunday night. Quote, "Yes, I'm leading a group of prominent Tampa Bay-based investors who are interested in acquiring the Tampa Bay Rays. We've assembled an incredible team that shares our vision," Molloy said. And if you're thinking, well, that name is familiar, yes, he was a former minority owner of the Yankees, had some personal ties and connections to the Steinbrenner family, had a lot of Yankees connections, is very prominent in the Tampa community in terms of sports and education and a lot of different things in business. Here's what he went on to say, quote, "What I can say now is this. The team has plans to stay in St. Petersburg, and we are fully committed to building on the great work that the city and county have already accomplished. We are incredibly excited about this opportunity, and that's all I can share at this time." End quote. So Mr. Molloy has exposed himself as the front man, so to speak, of this group. There are others. Apparently those others can also not be named due to NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, and some confidentiality agreements that were probably signed. And then there's reporting here from Evan Drellich of The Athletic. And again, between Mark and Evan, right, you're getting reliable sources here. Obviously, Mark is giving you that one ownership group. Evan is giving you even a little bit more. Apparently there's multiple groups, and also the definitive pressure by baseball and its owners. You're going to hear it's the commissioner pressuring the team to sell. It's really the owners telling the commissioner who's telling the team this message, if he has, or at least that's how it would happen. Evan's article starts like this. As he considers walking away from a stadium deal in St. Petersburg, Florida, Tampa Bay Rays owner Stu Sternberg is being pressured to sell his team by Commissioner Rob Manfred and some other owners. People briefed on the ownership level conversations who are not authorized to speak publicly told The Athletic. Well, there you go. And Evan is on this beat, covers this angle very well, so hard to go against any of this reporting at all or ever. One group includes the family of Edward DeBartolo Jr., which has roots in Tampa. 3 people briefed on the discussions said. 3 people said this. Members of the DeBartolo family, of course, own the San Francisco 49ers, although Edward Jr. is no longer involved with that team, the 49ers. Former New York Yankees minority owner Joe Molloy, mentioned before, is involved in the DeBartolo effort as well, so it sounds like maybe there's one group, but they could split into 2, but does not carry the same financial weight as DeBartolo. So Joe didn't want to name names. DeBartolo's name is now also out there. Is this multiple groups? Is this one group? Is this just a lot of people showing up to the table and interested all at once? Hard to really clarify that. The people briefed on the team's discussions also said Tampa businessman Dan Doyle Jr., who reportedly pulled out of a previous process to buy the Rays in 2023, is part of another group with recent interest. So we know there's at least 2 groups, maybe 2.5. And now through Evan's reporting, we also understand that there is some definitive pressure by the league towards this team, and not a demand, not a you must do this, but some pressure to either figure things out or maybe move on from ownership. MLB and the 49ers, because of the DeBartolo family, declined comment. Doyle and Molloy could not immediately be reached for comment. Right? And after something like this comes out, by the way, it all kind of came out within the span of an hour or so. Again, here on a Sunday night. I'm not saying this was strategic that it leaked, but at some point, I think somebody on the inside said, fine, you know what? We're going to put this out there. You can use our names. We can talk about this. We'll respond to your texts. We'll give you the quotes we want. Obviously, Mr. Molloy did that, and some others are certainly talking more about this. As for Sternberg, he has already been asked about this. He has already replied to this. Quote, I am interested to read about what industry partners have told you, Evan, about our franchise and its future, Sternberg said when reached for comment Sunday. Sounds like he's trying to say everybody's talking, but they don't know what they're talking about. He's taking a hard stance on this, Sternberg is, in terms of I'm not selling. And this is what he said about a month ago. This was to the Tampa Bay Times. If it was for sale, the Rays, quote, people would know it. I've always been and I will continue to be pretty transparent about our intentions, and not pretty, but very honest about them, and I have been. That has not necessarily served us well for the last 3 to 4 months in the stadium discourse and conversation between Pinellas County and St. Petersburg, the city, but that is who I am and will continue that way, end quote. So Sternberg is saying I would be honest if we were selling the team, and he's kind of already denied it without saying it in those exact words, but he basically was vague about it and saying, I'm interested to see what everybody else is saying about our team and our future and our intentions. He could have said, no, they're wrong, it's not for sale. He didn't say that, but he also didn't say they're right, and he also didn't do a no comment, right? And no comment sometimes means that what's being said is actually right. I just don't want to add on to it. Anyway, the deadline, let me remind you this, St. Petersburg and Pinellas County, they've already approved their money. Hundreds of millions of dollars towards this stadium project right next to the site of Tropicana Field, this gas plant district on 65 acres. So the city and the county are largely in. And the reason that they kind of went that way back in December, they had the vote for October, had to delay it because of the hurricane. We're supposed to take the vote in November, decided not to do it because the Rays didn't show up to the meeting, they said. And then ultimately did approve it in December because they felt like the Rays were maybe backing out of the deal already, and they liked the deal. They were okay with the deal. They didn't want the Rays to back out and move the team. So they voted yes on the deal the Rays proposed to keep them there. The Rays said, wait a second, it's going to cost us $150 extra million. We're maybe out of this. Then the Rays said, well, we could afford this, but we're not sure if we want to do this now. But the Rays need to have their checklist items complete by March 31st. We are talking like 3 weeks and counting here, or else this deal ends. It expires. If they don't do what they need to do by the 31st, and I don't know the exact items on that list, one of them is starting the funding mechanism for the project. Otherwise, the deal is off and the Rays lose control over the gas plant district site, 65 acres of land that Tropicana Field sits on. They would be basically in control of that if they do the deal. They're not in control of that if they're the ones that back out of this deal. The city and county, if they backed out, Rays would get to keep the land. But instead, city and county are in, so now if it's the Rays backing out, they're the ones that lose the land. So all of this, kind of a sub-story, right? The decision, the deadline, and things to figure out. But then here are my takeaways on the overall pressure to sell situation. St. Petersburg and Pinellas, because they've secured the public money, and because Rob Manfred has recently said that new stadium deals have to be a public-private partnership, I'm not saying I agree with that. He has said that's how they work best. Is it because the public side came through and now the private side is getting maybe cold feet on the deal? Is that why Manfred is saying, and baseball and its owners might be saying, hey, if we can't go forward with this, we need somebody else who can, because this is the deal we do, and you need to go forward with this. And let's be clear one more time. When it's pressure from Manfred, it doesn't mean Rob Manfred has had that tipping point in his mind where he's saying, I've had enough of this. I've seen what I've needed to see. It's not that. Rob Manfred is seen as the boss, that's the commissioner of Major League Baseball, but let's never forget, he works for all the owners, and he has represented the owners quite diligently, I might add, and maybe not as much the players, maybe not as much the fans. He's very much represented the owners as his first priority in the last handful of years. They want to change the game of baseball. He's there to help change the game of baseball. He wants teams like the A's, and yes, we are going to get to that conversation, to be able to move. Other teams think it's okay, or they do the unanimous vote. That's fine. He'll waive the relocation fee. The pressure from Manfred really means pressure from the other owners, that they're telling him to put pressure on Stu Sternberg. Rob Manfred is the commissioner, but he's very much the middleman in these situations. And so it kind of makes me wonder, are the other owners saying, you got to do this deal? Is the pressure to do the St. Pete Stadium deal, is that what's entirely behind all of this? Is there something else? Right? Like the Rays have produced a competitive baseball team over the years, and they've spent a lot less for a lot of years, but they've done a lot of things similar and different than the A's have, but they have had some success. Is it all about this? Is it all about the lack of ability to secure a new stadium? And is it the pressure to say, whoever takes this over, if we're going to pressure you to sell, we're going to make sure that somebody buys it. We're going to approve that group that buys it, knowing that they're only going to buy this to do that stadium deal because this is what we want. What about the Tampa situation? And I hope I can pronounce this right. I've been hearing criticism that I was saying Eber Harbor. Okay, am I saying it right this time? Is there a second idea on that? Maybe that's what the Rays were having second thoughts about here all the time. Maybe Tampa stepped in, city of Tampa, and said, hey, come build your waterfront ballpark here. We can do this all over again. We know you've got the deal in St. Pete. Maybe Tampa reemerged. How about the Orlando Dreamers? By the way, in Evan's article, which I'm not going to use the whole thing here, but I encourage you to read it, in The Athletic, apparently some sources are saying that Orlando is not totally out of the equation. It's 90 miles away northeast from Tampa. They've got the group up there with Barry Larkin, the Dreamers. They're trying for a baseball team, but expansion doesn't seem likely right around the corner. They would love to have the Rays. Orlando can never have a team of their own, expansion or anything else, if the Rays are 90 minutes away. I just don't think baseball is going to want that, competing teams in markets so close to each other like that, like Orlando and Tampa. I know you're saying, but what about New York? What about Chicago? What about LA? What about the former Bay Area with two teams? It's just, this is a little bit different. These two markets, I don't know, even 90 miles apart, I don't know that you want to have two teams that close. Bottom line is, all of this kind of goes into one conversation of, it seems like it's the stadium deal that has pushed this pressure over the tipping point and towards the Rays. And so here we get to the end of this video, and I haven't mentioned it yet, but I know a lot of you are thinking about this because the A's and Rays have been on, well, you know what, I'm just going to use the term parallel paths. They really have been. In different ways, right? Like the A's decided to leave the Coliseum. They said rent was too high. They'll go play in a minor league park where it's free. The Rays were forced out by a natural disaster. If it wasn't for Hurricane Milton going right over Tropicana Field and ripping off 2/3 of the tarp structure there, they'd be playing at the Trop again this year, and they'd still be going through all this stadium stuff, but at least they'd have a big league ballpark to play in. They had no choice but to go play at Steinbrenner Field in Tampa, the minor league home of the Yankees. But Baseball at the end of this, here's what I really want to get to, right? If these aren't identical situations, they're kind of apples and oranges, but they're very much similar in a lot of ways. Baseball should have to answer the question at the very end of this: why was it never a pressure deal on the A's to consider selling the team? And I say that with respect in a sense that it's giving somebody else the opportunity to try and get a deal done. And you still make out quite well with the sale of the team and the purchase price, and the valuations of these teams have gone up. Nobody's losing money here. But it's like, hey, we want to keep the team here. And if you really have exhausted every last effort, sell it. We just want to give somebody else a try. Well, make sure you get a deal. Maybe you can stay in on it somehow to some degree, but we just want to give somebody else a chance to try and get the deal done. We think it can get done. Let somebody else try. And that's, again, a situation that seems like it's happening here in Tampa. That was never the case in Oakland. Like I said, a unanimous vote, a lack of a relocation fee, a waived relocation fee for the A's. It's curious why baseball would handle two similar situations so differently. So at the end of this, and they'll never answer the question, I would love to hear baseball give a reason why. If this is really how it's going to go down for the Rays and they're going to be pressured to sell and Sternberg's going to sell, maybe he's not, by the way. But if he does and it goes this direction, baseball might want to have that answer ready of why they handled these two things so differently. Let one do whatever they want and then all of a sudden trap the Rays and said, well, you've got to sell this. And I want to make this last point, just like we've seen in the A's situation. The owner of the team owns the team, gets to do, for the most part, pretty much anything they want to do with the team. Of course, if you move it, you got to get relocation approved, but nobody can force Stu Sternberg to sell this team. And if he doesn't want to do it, to a large degree, they'd have to force him out, and then it gets really messy, and that's a long-term process. That doesn't just happen here in the next 3 weeks. So if they're trying to get something done, they know the stadium deal is expiring, they're putting the pressure on him right now, they know that ultimately he's got to do this on his own merit. He can be pressured, but ultimately this is going to be his decision. This is so interesting. This is so fascinating. I know we've been doing videos on this channel here about this topic, and a lot of people have been thinking, well, it's not prominent. There's still some time, and if they don't do this deal, he'll still own the team. This just goes to show you, behind the scenes in the last couple weeks, there's been a lot going on. Ownership groups, purchase groups coming together. Sternberg and his group probably talking to Orlando and Tampa all over again. Major League Baseball has been figuring out, all right, when are we going to step in and say something here? There's been a lot going on behind the scenes. I'm just very interested to see how this all plays out, and I'll be here for you to cover as much of it as I can. Hey, that's the end of this video. Thumbs up down below. Really appreciate that. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel so I can definitely see you back here next time.